Hello and welcome to the Pain Podcast with my name's Tim Beams and I'm joined by Bart van Bookham, and we're going to talk today about another myth out there, and the myth around posture and pain and whether or not there is such a thing as bad posture. So we've taken great delight actually already just amusing ourselves with the different pictures and Instagram posts and what have you relating to posture. So we can feed a bit about that back in a second. But I'm wondering, Bart, whether many of your patients come to see you and either they've been told or they tell you that they think their pain is posture related or that they have bad posture.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I think it's a societal. It's definitely an idea that sits in the society, at least in the Dutch. I guess it's pretty common. So people seem to be quite surprised when it's different. So that's my reflection, is that people are literally shocked by knowing or getting somewhat different information about posture as they thought. And I'm always asking, so where did that information come from? Where does it tell you that this is a bad posture and it's causing your back pain? Well, actually, sometimes it happens in childhood. So my mom always told me. And for other people, they said always being corrected about posture by, let's say, in their during their school, just the teacher basically requiring straightforward shoulders back, tummy in, and otherwise it would be the parents telling you you shouldn't slouch and sit straight. And I think it's really well. I think it will be very similar to myself as well. I think I've been confronted with some alternative information since I started doing my degrees in physiotherapy, perhaps. Yeah. So I do understand where this comes from.
Yeah. I'm wondering. I thought you were going to tell us about your kids because having kids is a really good insight into the sorts of positions, postures, etc., that they get themselves into. And I'm always kind of quite fascinated with what my kids do, like drapesing themselves over chairs, and it's like an exploration of all the different potential ways of using a chair.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I love it. And sometimes you can't. They will correct themselves in the end.
I mean, when they've fallen off, in that particular way enough times, it's used less often, isn't it?
When they start limping, when getting themselves up to the toilet or so, it's really, oh my god, I don't have any feeling in my hands or in my feet. It's tingling pins and needles.
Yeah.
They will explore. I like the idea of exploring for sure.
Yeah, totally. Although, and the reason we're doing this podcast is really to have a balanced opinion, isn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, I can see my role with my children where I want to sort of say, "Oh, come on, just sit up straight, or you stay in your chair," and I'm also have this other voice in my head going, "They're kids, let them do what they want to do and move how they want to move." And ultimately, that voice, the alternative voice in my head, is the one that's saying we should have that freedom, shouldn't we? We should have the flexibility and the freedom. I mean, it's called many different things: motor abundance, variability, to move in many different ways, or to adopt a number of different postures. Something, again, if I'm sort of reflecting on this question and thinking about my own experiences, what I notice now is I spend a lot of time sat in front of computers, which didn't seem to be on the agenda, on the cards, studying physiotherapy originally. thought I'd be quite an active person, but I have to force myself to get up and move. I have to put that into my day, and it's a very deliberate thing that I make sure I get out of my chair regularly. I move myself regularly. I exercise regularly as well, because I'm mindful of the amount of inactivity that I have in my day, where I'm adopting, in essence, very similar posture for long periods of the day. And I don't feel like, for me, that is a great thing. I notice when I haven't been able to give myself opportunities to get up and move and sort of break up that day as well.
Yeah, and it does feel different to compared to 10 years ago, I have to say. I'm definitely less resilient to, to sitting down and not moving. It definitely makes me feel older.
Yeah.
At least I'm standing up. Although it can differ as well. Sometimes you actually can sit for a long time. It doesn't really make any difference. And sometimes it like 10 minutes is like, I need to move, right? Or otherwise you will find out, well, once you start moving again. But I think the whole thing is like the freedom to explore, and also I think sitting in inactivity, maybe in a broader sense, is definitely a problem. And I think that's where the nuances lies, right? Where inactivity versus passivity, passivity or activity versus flexibility. I guess that's where I feel my comfort, where I need to move because I've always done so far. But I do see people who are like world champions sitting. They do pretty well sitting down and not having a lot of issues. I'm not sure if they're healthier, but they do seem to do a good job in doing that. So it's really interestingly. So whether you're going to get these people sitting or standing up and doing movements during the day, they sometimes get really frustrated and not necessarily feeling better with the advice. So that's where the let's say um, the physio advice may sit. Yeah, it's interesting. Also, what I also find out when we talk about posture, they're starting to apologize themselves. Yeah, I know I've got a bad posture.
Yeah.
Oh, I know I'm sitting too much. So why you're asking? Well, why are you saying this? Well, you're a physio, right? And you should do it right. I should do more because that's what physios want. So there seems to be a quite strong. Let's say this sticks with our profession, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. What you see someone sitting wrong from a mile away.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder whether, so there's a few things that like crop up for me. There is like that self blame. We've talked about self blame before, haven't we? And we're brilliant at being our own saboteurs in thinking and doing and acting and what have you. But I'm wondering about whether or not, for instance, there is such a thing as bad or good posture, or is it just what it is? Who's to say that it's good posture, or who's to say it's bad posture? Is it because it just literally looks more pleasing on the eye?
Well, that's a good. Maybe it is also because it's like I think we just have to go back to like back in the ages, right? What has I'm not sure if the Romans were pretty lazy, especially when they were rich and wealthy. They were lying down in all kinds of positions and not necessarily looking active. It was rather the people who did the work who looked like healthier, although they didn't seem to survive those times. But it's I think it has at some point it has become like being being straight or sitting straight might also tell you something about someone's personality, or let's say your how you feel, being confident.
Mm.
I think that's become more and more important to do that. Maybe like the non-verbal no non-verbalized version is sitting straight. And if you don't do that, you look like shit. You should do better, because we don't. As a parent, I don't want to see my child sitting like this, because other people would have an opinion on that, and basically telling them the personality, or they're not resilient, right? They're not strong. They should look strong, which is interesting. I guess that's maybe some of the part. I also just thought about a recent paper about changing behavior. It's a review that, or no, it's a meta analysis. I will check out in a bit for the author, but it was about how we're going to change posture and or like behavior, because I think changing posture is about changing behavior in many ways. So I do think there sits a. So why is it difficult to change it? And one of the things what didn't seem to be that important to that meta analysis is that it's not just telling people it's wrong or bad isn't really an incentive. There are other ways. There are other things that actually do change it, and I think that that's a really interesting bit. So even though whether we not necessarily, or we may have an opinion on whether this is good and wrong, and I don't think there is a good and wrong like you. But if you want to change it, it's just telling people it's bad. I think it's like a maybe a good marketing sentence just to get people attention, but then really to change it, that definitely needs some. Well, definitely needs some more, I guess. So that's where we can jump in as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering. I'm thinking of like marketing campaigns like sitting is the new smoking and things like that, and grabbing the sort of emotional experience of people to help as a catalyst for behavior change. I went to my dental hygienist a few weeks back, and he was saying, "Do you floss?" I was like, "Yes, I floss." "How often?" "A couple of times a week." "That's not enough. You got to do more." And I said to him, "Oh, do you feel like saying that to me is going to help me to do more?" And that sort of got lost in the ether somewhere. I think he'd just been told that he needs to tell everybody to do more, but I didn't feel like it was possible. I'm really interested, Bart, because the idea of expression through your posture is a really interesting thing, and something that when you see people in pain that can change is their ability to be able to express themselves. So you do see a shift and a change in the way that they move or the types of postures that they adopt. Their expression of self through their posture as well can change, and that's a really interesting observation of yours. And something that you see in a process of recovery is, as a sort of a non-verbal cue, is often that someone literally is moving, like the way that they express themselves are just a little bit different. And it's not surprising if when you are in pain, you're not feeling awesome, you don't feel really happy and excited, and that you express that through your posture as well. And that, to say that's bad, is is a real downbeat on that person who is already struggling in their world. So yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested in that. Should we, if that is the case, I mean, we could just as easily emphasize creating a condition of joy and happiness and feeling like, whatever bright it would be for that person, rather than telling them to sit upright or pull their shoulders back. Or we did a lovely search, didn't we? We saw lots of pictures of these very healthy people showing you how you should sit and stand.
Yeah, we should. You just mentioned it, and I thought, like, oh hell yeah, that's exactly what's happening, especially on Instagram, but also the images they use for posture are typically young, healthy, good-looking people trying to look like they're having a bad posture and having back pain, which is ironically the people who has the least problem probably were used as an example, which is also makes it less interesting, I guess. When you, I'm not sure whether these posts are targeted on healthcare professionals to start using this stuff, where it's on consumers. But I think one of the comments that we get from consumers from research is they're using the wrong images and the wrong sentences, because we're not, and I'm not, it's not really, it really doesn't look appealing to me like this, which is really important to me, as well as trying to find a different strategy to discuss posture, because we can say, well, it doesn't matter posture, which will be the other end of the spectrum. And sometimes for people that would be too contrary, right? So too much of, this is the opposite, and that can be frustrating. I'd rather start exploring postures and what it makes you feel. So some people feel very guilty when they start slouching, which I found, wow. If you so imagine you're slouching right now and feeling guilt, like real guilt. I shouldn't do this because and there's a whole range of reasons, like my physio told me, or my doctor, my parents, my school teacher. I guess that's amazing, right? Because then posture has started to create something new. It's not like, this is definitely not what we're looking for in the first place, but if it is, I love it, because it allows you to explore it and see, can you try it a bit more, and even making pictures of people who think they slouch are quite surprised when they see their back in what they think is very slouched in the lower back, and it's actually not slouched at all, because the picture shows that there's very limited flexion in the lower back. So they're really surprised. It's actually the shoulders that move more in a different direction, which will be that's really interesting. But showing that image actually creates some, in my experience, really creates some violation of this expectation.
Yeah.
And that's where we can gently start exploring. Perhaps there are different movements. Maybe there are many of other ways of using your posture to feel different, or if you feel vulnerable, how to cope with that, especially when it comes to back pain. You feel like sitting straight up is very helpful, because it gives you that feeling of control. Yeah, it does feel control, but it's very tiring as well. And maybe, what's your experience like, Timmy, with posture and in the clinical setting?
Yeah, I like your ideas there, and perhaps we need to summarize them because there's so much. But very often, the people I'm seeing, for instance, I've just got off a call with someone who has pelvic pain, and sitting is a problem, but also standing for periods of time is a problem. So there is some sort of postural link in terms of their pain. So to ignore that would be harmful, I think, anyway, to be harmful, or to say things like, or to, like you said, a contrary message where you're saying actually posture has nothing to do with it. Well, clearly it does. Clearly there is a link that they are struggling sitting, and sitting accounts for a lot of our day, actually. This is not a negative thing. It's just what we do. We sit down for periods, and struggling being able to do that actually is massively impacting on your life. So figuring that out with that person is a really important part of my work with them sometimes. So yeah, I think that would be like a very common examples that sitting might be a problem. Another thing, but perhaps we don't see it so much, although perhaps we need to do some searches on bed posture or something like that. But there are certain positions that people struggle in bed as well, whether it's sleeping on their back or their side or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
So
best
so
posture
be
and bad. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really
and you get,
interesting.
people are peddling messages about um, the right pillows, the right mattresses, whether or not you put something between your knees or under your arm, or you do whatever you need to do in order for you to get a really good night's rest. And if you're in pain, that might need a bit more consideration. So there are ways of just exploring and experimenting, so you find a way. But yeah, if pain and adopting postures is problematic, then it's something that you should spend some time on. But that to say that it's because you have bad posture, your posture is wrong, I think isn't helpful. So flipping that around to noticing that adopting certain postures and positions can be challenging, I think is important, and widening the possibilities, bringing more possibilities in, I think can be really helpful as well. So whether
Yeah,
that's
totally.
whether that's finding, and then I'm thinking about some of the men that I work with pelvic pain, it might be that they can sit on a comfortable chair or with one of those circular donut cushions or whatever to begin with, but just create the condition that they might be able to sit, even though it's not for as long as they want, is really key. So keep maintaining the ability, instead of shutting it off and having none of that in your life, to finding alternative ways of bringing that in, I think is important.
Yeah, and it's not like you don't have to blame it, right? So you don't have to refute the idea of that posture can be influential.
Yeah,
I guess it can be a factor in, but it may be more complicated than you would
maybe.
think, because when especially it's like breathing, right? You not mentioned that actually breathing is, you never mentioned, so breathing is very normal, but it may change, it may vary due to conditions. And I think posture does exactly the same. It can tell you something about fatigue, it can tell you something about personality, it can tell you something about feeling safe or unsafe. And by blaming that, say it's bad, it's just like you said, I think it's bad, it's a nocebo to do it, because it's not necessarily something. I do think it's something, a reason, because when there is a reason to mention it or to discuss it or to not necessarily confront, but at least show it to people what's going on and allow them to mirror it and to see what's going on, because
Yeah,
you never. It's an opportunity for treatment rather than creating that good or right or wrong idea, which is I think is very harmful as well. And when it's bad, and I think that's the whole thing in social media, but also in YouTube and other channels and websites, that when it's bad, just click through. You will find out they usually have a device to correct it. They're not asking you how you feel about it. They will have something to sell. So actually, to say there's something wrong with you, and here is the solution, which is great marketing from that perspective, but it's bullshit. It's very unlikely that it will be the solution. I think it's better to explore it and see if this device can be helpful. I do think some devices, like having a cushion or whatsoever, can be helpful in some cases, but like the let's say the help or the ever solution for everything, that's definitely not going to be it. People are my patients do have tried every single device you can imagine,
yeah,
everything, and no one. They will always tell you like nothing helped, and they tend to be very like hopeful in the beginning because of the messaging or the marketing basically was like very making them it sounded like reasonable and valid to them, plausible, and then they start using it, they taught, and they start feeling like, all right, it's actually, this is working. And then after a while, probably days, maybe even hours, they will realize that, well, actually not, no, it's not what I thought it would be. So yeah, again, like that's where we should be considering to be more careful about what posture basically means. It's about so much more than just anatomy.
Yeah, yeah. And as you're saying that, and first of all, I'm just agreed that there are times and situations where certain devices are really, really helpful. I mean, I remember the lumbar roll was a big thing, certainly in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I hate to think how much our department at that point where I was working spent on things like that. But rolling up a towel and put it in the base of your back was a really lovely thing for some people with back pain, and so easy as a solution. Yeah. But I'm not just coming back to, if they've got back pain, it's a fairly new onset, or maybe it's been grumbling away for a year or 2 years. Their posture probably served them really well before that, but it just so happens that there's a different flavor when you're in pain in terms of how you feel and what you move like and how you express yourself. And there is that, like the pain specific shift that we would get. I was sorry, my scattergun brain is just coming, and self blame obviously coming in here. But I was thinking, not everybody can do this. So obviously, depending on where you work, you might not be able to do this. But taking a picture or a video of someone, albeit on their phone, and showing them back, can be transformational, can't it? Like someone said, "Do I really sit like? Do I really move like that?" It's not so bad after all. And there are studies on body perceptual change and things, aren't there, relating to low back pain, and how people identify, what they feel like isn't necessarily where they are, and that disconnect between the perceptual processes and the sensory data that's coming they don't equate. They're not matching up. So we are in a wonderful place in order for us to be able to help shift that back, and using very simple strategies and tools like some visual feedback from camera or mirror, or the feel of someone's hands as you're doing it, can be just awesome, can't they?
It is. It's very powerful, as well as the nocivic effect of using the words as bad. And I just want to highlight that we're going to have a science session with Andrea Evers. She's a professor at Leiden University, and she's going to talk about nocivic and placebo effects regards use of words as a scientist. And she's like a heavyweight in the world of placebo and nocivic research. She's done amazing stuff. So go check her out. She will be our guest at the 3rd of July. So that will be something that will be announced shortly. Something just to hang in there, and we'll have some discussions around that. So I'm really looking forward to that session.
So now I feel like we need to give some placebo language or some positive language. And if you've got any specific phrases that you use, the first one that comes to mind, and I occasionally use it, is your next position is your best position. Have you got any that go to sort of ways that you might explain something to posturally to someone?
Yeah, I like the experiment with the picture, for example, which I really, really enjoy, because that's something like a process. It's not just that word, it's basically the proof and that experience. What does it make you feel? Like adding the emotional component and adding the and asking people to run an experiment over the next week. Just try to think, just touch the back of your seat. If you sit down, just make sure you touch the back of your seat and see what's happening. And people find out actually they're sitting always on the basically on the front of the seat, right? So they're really in a sort of a, how you say that, like very aroused. They're sitting there, and therefore they're very much on it, and they didn't realize this. So and after a week, they found out, like, wow, what's happening? I'm amazed how that worked out, and it was so easy just to not just using that back of the seat, which was actually quite comfortable, as well as experiments running it with like putting pressure on people instead of sitting straight up and just slouch it and see how much you can handle with somewhat the same weight on your shoulders and see how that goes. So this experiment will very likely be very beneficial to people who are starting to explore somewhat more flexion in the back, because that's anatomically it's like a good thing to do, or at least it's a sensible thing to do, and it actually makes you feel carrying less. So people experience being less hyperventilated, that actually more comfortable with bearing the weight, and that's mind blowing for some people. And I'm always looking for that that bit that little experience, because that's what would take people, that will take it home, right? This is what makes you like, wow, this is something I need to repeat, instead of just the words. I think it's the combination.
Yeah. The experiential process. Absolutely. Yeah. So, well, I guess we have to sum up, unfortunately. But that's been it's been great having a chat. And well, we came here thinking about whether there was such a thing as bad posture, and the relationship of posture and pain, and what we've basically covered is that when someone's in pain, it can absolutely have an effect on their posture, and that may be that they struggle to get into certain postures, different sitting postures, standing, lying, whatever it might be. It might be through the expression physically of themselves, and maybe there is a relationship. I'm always thinking about the basal ganglia and emotion. So yeah, you see a difference in the expression and the physicality of someone and how they represent themselves through their body. Perhaps there's a few nocebo messages out there, but oh wow, I mean, if we really look at it, we can blame our parents for everything, can't we? And I'm sure our children will.
I'm sure they did their best.
Yeah, but it's a wonderful window into what the messaging might be that people are exposed to. So you may have been told to sit up, sit straight, sit still, etc. at school, at home, and that obviously has influences on you later on in life. And then we are bombarded by messages in our world, aren't we, at the moment? And some of the messages that we found very, very easily doing a couple of searches was that there was 8 signs for bad posture, 10 signs, 10 exercises to sit up straight, and all of those sorts of messages. But interestingly, those messages were often delivered by extremely healthy looking people, and whether or not that was diverse enough or covered enough of the population who might be struggling with pain and in certain postural positions is another matter. And then we've discussed some of the more positive ways of identifying and using and exploring posture and that disconnect, but also of giving someone, I'm thinking about the self-efficacy, but giving someone the power to be able to explore and experiment and be confident to do that themselves, and bring back that concept of motor abundance and movement variability.
Yes, and just to add the paper that I mentioned, if you want to just write it down if you want, is called Determinants of Behavior and Their Efficacy as Targets of Behavioral Change Interventions. First author is Albarracin. I'm not sure if I'm
tripped off the tongue, but that was an easy read, obviously, wasn't it?
Albarracin. It's a Nature Review Psychology. It's very interesting. I think just one of those things, you think how much knowledge contributes to behavior change compared, for example, to emotions is much more, and habits was like a massive contributor on individual factors in people, what's driving change. So something we just have to take into account when we're trying to discuss posture. That is,
Lovely.
it's not just about telling it's bad. We'd rather don't say that you want to, because I do think when hitting that nocebo, you will get people in trouble. It's less likely to get people on board, even if you feel like they could do better. I guess that we shouldn't say that, and there's no reason to, because there's so many other things we can say are much more worthwhile and helpful. Yeah,
I totally agree with you. So, if you've enjoyed the podcast, well, first of all, thanks for listening. And
you made it. You made it to the end.
You made it to the end. Go out, tell everybody, run down the street, and tell them that you've just listened to this amazing podcast, and knock on your neighbours' doors. And
yes, hit like, subscribe,
share it at work, subscribe, etc. If you want to get confident treating pain, then come over to Lub Scientifique. And there's lots available at the moment. There's some free guides. There's a new free guide coming out very, very soon. And for those premium members, they get an access to Andrea Evers' session, for instance, on nocebic language or nocebo.
3rd of July, just save the date.
3rd of July. And what better way to get comfortable working and happy and enjoy what you're doing, because we truly believe you can make a difference. So come on over, check it out, and wishing everybody all the best.
Thank you for listening, and catch up in another couple of weeks again. Yeah, ciao.